Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 64 of the Drop It podcast. This podcast is tailor-made for those of you with weight to lose, those of you that are losing weight now, and those of you that are bathing in the success of your weight loss accomplishment. If you've never seen me before or it's your first time on the show, hi, I'm Nick Geoppo. I am your host. I lost and gained back 50 plus pounds 6 times in my life before 2019. When I got to 2019, I lost 110 pounds, and I've kept it off for what has now been about 6 years on something that I call the common sense diet. What the common sense diet did is it gave me the most practical and sustainable and non-obsessive nutrition plan ever, and I built a system around it called the common sense diet system that I put myself through. And what I did was I actually addressed every single thing one at a time. Instead of trying to have this perfect plan from the very beginning, I let things build into a way that was actually sustainable. I addressed my mindset, my relationship with food, meaning emotional eating, coping with food, binge eating, all of those sorts of things, permanent sustainable habits and lifestyle changes, starting really slow and becoming a little bit more routine over time instead of trying to have a perfect routine from the very beginning. And I addressed all of the things that led to my obesity in the first place, meaning I went back into my own mind and addressed every single thing that I remember about being fat when I was a kid, everything that was ever taught to me about food when I was a kid, anytime that I was put on a diet or told that I should lose weight, all of these different things. The common sense diet system that I put myself through and built for myself ultimately led to me working through all of them and not just losing weight and keeping it off, but truly putting obesity behind me for good. And there's a difference there, right? There's people that lose weight on these quote unquote diets like keto or whatever the fuck, and then they keep the weight off because they stay on a diet forever. The common sense diet is something that you can do forever with ease because it's non-restrictive. I've been doing it for 6 years and I will be on the common sense diet for the rest of my life. You take the common sense diet, you combine it with addressing all of the mental things that I just addressed and just brought up to you. That's when you actually keep the weight off. And that's what the common sense diet system is all about. That's what I've dedicated my life to helping you through, whether you're a client of mine or not. This podcast, episode 64, is dedicated. I'm so excited to dedicate this episode to my client, Nedra, who I've been working with one-on-one we just hit 12 weeks together. And I want to read you what she wrote in our group. She says, "Wow, cannot believe I've just finished week 12. I've broken so many promises to myself." She says, quote, "I'll get my shit together tomorrow. I'll start on Monday for real this time. No doubt if I go back and could, it would be hundreds and sadly I'm not reading this properly. No doubt if I could go back and count, it would be hundreds and sadly most of those promises were broken by breakfast. Couldn't get even through the 1 or 2 days, just one freaking meal. But hot damn diggity dog, am I glad I kept this promise. Bringing me down 12 weeks, 29.5 pounds, kicked to the curb, smashed to the park forever, right along with a host of non-scale victories too. And really, this is just the beginning. What I have really loved about working with Nedra and what I found to be so inspiring from her is how she has really adopted and stepped into the lifestyle changes and committing to a lifetime of health. That's what the common sense diet system is all about. It's not a means to an end to hit a number on the scale. It's a means to feeling good about your own life and living the lifestyle of a healthy person. It's an inside out game instead of an outside in game. We're changing who we are. As a result, the scale's moving instead of changing the scale to feel better about ourselves. That's never going to be sustainable because you've already lost weight before. And at some point, you're not going to have any weight to lose. So the question becomes, what are we going to do different this time? Congratulations, Nedra. So excited to continue this journey of sustainability with you. And this podcast episode is dedicated to you. If you'd like to join Nedra and apply to either work with me one-on-one or to be a part of our group, you can click the description in the link of this podcast episode or of this YouTube video. Fill out the short form. It's going to take you about 5 minutes, and that will take you straight to book a call with me directly, and I'll walk you through what it's all about, and you can let me know if you think it's a good fit for you, and I'll let you know if I think it's a good fit for the both of us. And if so, we'll do it together for real this time. This podcast, episode 64, is really for the people where they find food to be their sole source of joy. So when food is your only joy, there's really nothing that you're going to be able to do to work through having a healthy relationship with food. You're just not. And what this comes from for me is, here's my history when it comes to food being my sole source of joy. I grew up in a household where we would sometimes drive 5 hours one way just to get Chick-fil-A. So I grew up in eastern Washington State, a place called Spokane. There was no Chick-fil-A there when I was a kid. There was a Chick-fil-A in Idaho. I think it was near Boise somewhere. So we would drive over 5 hours just to go get Chick-fil-A. And it was a fun experience. And it was cool being in the car with the family and we'd make it fun, watch a movie in the back. But it wasn't actually really about the car ride. It was not about the journey. It was about the obsessiveness and the pull that my family members felt towards Chick-fil-A specifically. And that is the most extreme story ever, right? But this comes up with my clients all the time. So I know that whether you're a client of mine or not listening to this, that to some degree you're going to relate to the concept of just getting in the car to go drive 25 minutes to get your favorite ice cream, or doing something really inconvenient to your actual life and your routine and your schedule, or to fill time just to go get a specific food that you really like because the joy of that food is so high, right? And the reality of my life as an adult, when I was fat as fuck up until 2019, was that food actually it wasn't my sole source of joy, but it was my biggest source of joy. So I always felt the best when I was eating. I felt the best when I was eating. And that's not necessarily bad. You want to feel good when you eat. You don't want to feel bad when you're eating. You don't want to look at food as calories or food as protein or food as, it's just here so that I can lose weight and I can just got to get control and I don't need to enjoy it. I'm just going to eat chicken, broccoli, and rice. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that when food is your sole source of joy, meaning that if you went throughout the day and wrote down every single task that you did, went to work, drove the car, watched a movie, had sex with my wife, husband, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, hung out with the kids. If you had to rate all of those things 1 through 10 on how much pleasure you got from them, and then you had to eat breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, milkshake, whatever. If the eating pleasure is higher than the pleasure from the other things, you're fucked. It doesn't matter what you do. You will be fucked forever if you do not work through this part first, right? So what people do is they don't even have, a lot of people, including myself, don't have the awareness to even see that or to think in that way. So we tend to think that I'm just going to ignore all of the foods that I find really pleasurable and then just lose the way that I'm going to figure out how to keep it off after I get there. No, you're not. I'm speaking to my old self here. Old fat Nick, no, you are not. You did try, though, for 6 years in a row, and I commend you for your effort and the discipline you put into that. Here I am in the fucking metaverse sending you a message 6 years later. Here's how to work through it, Nick, in 2019. Figure out, first, you need to understand how food became your sole source of joy. And for me, it was growing up, it was, treats as rewards, food as a reward for anything, like cleaning and then eating food, or all of my positive emotions as a kid were tied to some sort of food, whether it was getting in the car with my mom to go drive to get a Dairy Queen Blizzard or a dilly bar or an ice cream or McDonald's, a cinnamon roll from McDonald's on the way to school. You know what was better than going to school? Getting up to go to school to get the McDonald's cinnamon roll on the way. That was how I got out of the door. I don't want to go to school. Well, that's we'll go get McDonald's. Okay. And then we're there and then we're already out. Then we're going to school. Now I don't feel as bad about going to school. That was really consciously or subconsciously what was happening in my life and in my household. So from a very young age, I associated food with junk food specifically with extreme positivity, right? So food became one of my sole sources of joy and also a motive for my family in some ways. And this isn't their fault at all, right? They didn't have the level of awareness to understand that this might not serve me in my life, but it was used as a way to get me to do things that I didn't want to do, that I should be doing as a kid anyway. It's not like I was doing things that I shouldn't have been doing, but go to school, let's go get McDonald's. It's okay. Well, my family also loved going to get McDonald's, so they were doing the same thing to themselves too, right? So treats were used as a reward. That was a big thing for me on how food became such a source of joy. But another way is coping mechanisms, right? So we all have, but I can speak for myself, had a lot of negativity in my life, have had a lot of negativity in my life, a lot of self-hatred and a lot of wasting time and a lot of growing up in a household that might have not been conducive for a healthy relationship with food or a healthy relationship, with myself. Growing up in a single parent household as the only guy in the house, right? So what I did was I used food to cope with a variety of emotions. And I'm sure you relate to this, but the big ones being stress, loneliness, boredom at times. And what happens when you're feeling these low vibration emotions, right? Stress, boredom, loneliness, anger, depression, whatever it might be, fear of the future, fear of dying, all these kind of lower vibration sort of emotions that make you feel like shit in your body and in your head. Let's say that you had to rate how you feel out of 10 when you're feeling those emotions. So when I'm really sad, I'm a 2 out of 10, let's say, for example. When I'm eating a piece of pizza from Domino's, while I'm actually eating it, I am a 9 out of 10. So that jump from 2 out of 10 to 9 out of 10 is huge. Like I can go from the lowest of the low to the highest of the high within 1 second of putting a piece of pizza in my fucking mouth. And I'm not paying attention to how I'm going to feel afterwards because I don't really care. I'm living for the now. I'm living for the moment. I don't want to be in this low vibrational emotion that makes me feel like shit anymore. So let me put some food. Food is not a drug, but this is how you use food as a drug. And this is how I used food as a drug. I would put it into my body to then feel good, knowing that I'd feel like shit, but just ignoring the fact that I'd feel like shit afterwards, right? So using food to cope with any sort of emotion does actually make food better tasting in the long run, because your jump from really low to really high, really negative feeling to really positive feeling, that range, the acceleration there from a 2 out of 10 to a 9 out of 10 in that example, 7 out of 10 points jumping from eating a piece of pizza is massive. So now I associate massive hits of dopamine and positivity to whatever food I was eating. Pizza, ice cream. For some of us, it's not necessarily junk. It might be like a sandwich. Sandwiches aren't necessarily bad for you, right? It might be like a single Coca-Cola. A single Coca-Cola is not going to kill you. If you're doing this every day or multiple times a day, that's not great. So it doesn't need to be as extreme as my story. There's still medicine here for you. The lessons still apply regardless of what specific quality of food you're using this for, right? This is not a quality of food issue. This is an issue that we're discussing is of coping with something instead of addressing the emotion. So the way Nick in 2019, Fat Nick 6 years ago, that you work through this is by building comfort in addressing the emotion. So when the emotion comes up, to be able to literally just put your hand on your chest and a hand on your stomach, close your eyes, take a breath, and vocally speak out loud, if you're in a position where you're alone and you can do that, what you're feeling and why you're feeling it. If you know, you might not know why you're feeling the way that you are. I'm feeling stressed out because my boss said this and it pissed me off and then it made me feel bad about work and I hate my job. I'm a 2 out of 10 right now. I'm low, worst I've felt in a long time. Right? I recognize in myself the proclivity to eat this food, whatever the specific food is for you, because it's going to make me feel better in the short term. I recognize that I have the ability to sit with the discomfort of this emotion, find other ways to cope with it, and actually connect with what it is that I truly deserve, which is not to eat 3 pieces of pizza. What I truly deserve is to feel good about my own life. And if I go and eat this pizza, I will feel good for about 20 minutes. But 20 minutes after eating it, I will actually feel worse about myself and about the situation that is leading to me wanting the pizza in the first place. Rewind the last 60 seconds of that podcast and find your own language to get that message across to yourself, and then write it down on a piece of paper. And you bring that in, that's how you're going to stop coping with food. You're going to do that 3 or 4 times. Take a video of yourself saying, I wanted to cope with food. This is what I did. No, I'm not. Boom. Now you're not coping with food anymore. That's all you need to know about coping with food. Learn to sit with the discomfort of the emotion or address the emotion head on, whichever one is applicable to your specific situation. That takes courage. And it's hard. It's fucking hard. But this is why weight loss is so confronting, because that has nothing to do with food. It has everything to do with your life and your personality and your willingness to actually sit with something that's very difficult, and to sit with the parts of yourself that you don't actually like, so that you stop getting these huge dopamine hits from food, where food is now your biggest or potentially your sole source of joy. Right? You're getting such big dopamine hits from food. How are you ever going to keep the weight off? You're going to keep eating good on the weekdays and then getting dopamine hits on the weekends when you're not in your routine, or when you're coping with the fact that you're not doing the things you should be doing or not making the progress you should be making, whatever it might be. Now, here's the thing with highly processed foods, right? The junk food, the total bullshit food, doesn't mean you can't ever eat it. Pizza, ice cream, chicken strips, fried foods, French fries, cheeseburgers, whatever it might be, right? They are literally designed to trigger pleasure and cravings in your body. They are literally designed. So when we say processed foods, most people don't understand what that actually means. I did not for a long time. Processed foods are not necessarily bad, but when we look at a scale, we've got processed foods, we've got unprocessed foods. Now, the language that I use are real foods. And that's not either a processed or real. It's a spectrum of how real or how processed the food is, right? But whenever any kind of nutrients is extracted from a food, that is considered a processed food. So meat, fruit, rice, vegetables, potatoes, milk, cheese, these are not very processed foods. Those are real foods, whole, real, natural foods. Processed foods are not necessarily junk, right? You can eat a healthy wrap, but a wrap is a processed food in this case. We got flour, the tortilla's got, 3 or 4 different ingredients in it. There's different things inside of there that have multiple ingredients. If there's multiple ingredients to the food, it's basically a processed food most of the time, but that's not a definite rule. So use common sense. You know what foods are real and what foods aren't. You know what foods are good for you and what foods are not quality wise, right? Step back into the common sense mentality. Don't get too caught up in the specifics the way that I am right here. When you eat highly processed foods, the ones that we all know are bad, that nobody debates are not good for you to eat a lot of, doesn't mean we can't ever eat them, right? They're designed for you to get massive dopamine hits. So all of the actual nutrients of the food are extracted, and you're just eating what people quote unquote call empty calories. I don't love that language, but it's the language that people use. So I'm going to use it here so that you can understand what I'm saying. Empty calories meaning you're going to feel like shit afterwards, but you're getting a lot of calories for just a little bit of food. Like a big piece of pizza, for example, might have 600 or 700 calories. It's not actually that much food compared to 600 calories of meat and fruit and rice, potatoes, and vegetables, right? So feel the difference there. The nutrients are extracted. All the good shit is extracted. There's almost no protein. There's very little vitamins, minerals, all of these other things. And you're getting massive dopamine hits from a bunch of sugar, from a bunch of flour, from a bunch of carbohydrates, right? Sugar is a type of carbohydrate that literally spike your blood sugar level when you eat them, that make you go, woo, and like your eyes open up for just a second, and you get this hit the way that you do when you eat sour candy, right? But just not to the same extremity. And it changes your heart rate, changes your mood. There's a levity to you. There's an obsessiveness to it. And then you put the food down. And then the dopamine hit goes away. And now you're digesting all of the food and your energy crashes, mixed with all of your blood sugar now starting to crash, right? So you go up, big blood sugar hit, spike, go right back down, because you're dealing with extracted food. So you're not eating real sugar, or you're not eating real sugar in the form of carbohydrates the way that you do with fruit, where there's fiber that slows the spike, right? You're eating no fiber. There's basically no fiber in any of these highly processed foods. So it just hits you right away. What fiber does is it makes it so that your blood sugar level doesn't spike up super rapidly. So there's not typically a crash associated with eating real sugar with fiber in that way. But with processed foods, they're designed for you to get a massive dopamine hit. So yeah, of course, you're going to be at an 8, 9, or 10 out of 10 on the fucking feeling scale and be absolutely hooked on wanting to do that again and again and again. The same way that people that do heroin are. Again, food is not a drug, because the solution to being a heroin addict is to stop doing heroin. The solution to obesity is not to stop eating, because you need to eat to live. It's not the same as cigarettes, right? The solution to cigarettes is to stop smoking cigarettes. The solution to losing weight is not to stop eating. You don't need cigarettes to live. It's not the same as booze. You don't need booze to live, right? But we treat it like it. You're treating it like a dopamine hit, like a drug. You're going out of your way to the point where it's an inconvenience into your actual life, right? The way to work through that is to eat more real foods that you like. Because when you do that, your connection to food is going to change. So right now, not my blood sugar level, but the dopamine that I get from taking an apple and putting a little bit of honey on it with a piece of cheese with 2 to 3 dates, like the fruit dates on the side, is the same dopamine, the same positive feeling, maybe even more than I would get from eating a pint of ice cream. I've also been properly fueling my body for multiple years, consistently, 29 out of 30 days a month, right? I'm making that up, but that's probably about what it's been. And doing so non-obsessively and doing so naturally without even thinking about it anymore because it's just who I am. So that's taken me time for me to get there, but that is the reality that you're working towards. And that reality is possible. No one ever told me that. People were just telling me to count all of my calories and eat low-calorie ice cream and high-protein, candy or whatever the fuck. And that didn't work. What I did was I completely reset my dopamine over time and the things that I actually liked. So my palate completely changed too. Now the idea of eating a full pint of ice cream, it's not even something that I want to do. If I went 24 hours without eating, I still would not want to eat a full pint of ice cream. It feels disgusting to do that. I've also done that probably 500 to 1,000 times in my life. So I'm really connected to how shitty I felt after doing that every single time and how shitty I felt for multiple days. Because I mentally would be like, my dopamine would be so shot that I'd want to then shoot back up. And then I would just keep using food as this source of pleasure, right? And this is literally using food as a drug. Food was my only source of joy. And what we're not talking about here is that the reason that this all happened in this way is because I did not have any hobbies or passions outside of food. I had obsessions, but I didn't have hobbies or passions. So my hobbies at the time when I was fat were like drinking alcohol, doing stupid shit with my friends, going out to the bars, spending time with women that I should not have been spending time with, right? This is how I was using my time. I wouldn't call these hobbies or passions, but if I was to actually write down what I was doing in my life and then go back and look at it at the end of each week or each month, minute to minute, if I was to be able to see what I was doing, that's what I was spending all my time doing. And then working a job that I hated. So, of course, I'm going to want to feel some positive feeling, given that everything I was doing was pretty negative. Spending time with people that were not helping me get to the place that I wanted to go because I didn't know what I wanted. So I had no vision for the future. So I felt stuck, didn't think about the future, had a lot of medical anxiety, spending time with women I shouldn't have been around, dating girls that I didn't even really want to be with, and had just no vision and felt like shit about my job and thought I'd be working the job that I hated for the rest of my life. Thank God I put myself through this journey and am now dedicating my whole career to helping other people through the same thing, because now none of this exists for me in the same way, because I'm actually I have some passions now and I have some hobbies now, right? For me, my hobbies now are going and playing basketball, going on super ridiculously long walks outside, listening to podcasts, filming podcasts like this, engaging with people on social media. Eating, I still enjoy eating, but these other things I enjoy so much more than I do eating that I could live a great life without food. If there was no eating anymore, the concept of eating just went away. Ask yourself this: if the concept of eating went away completely, like food disappeared from this planet, no one even knew what food was, you had unlimited fuel, we just breathed air to live, and you had all the energy in the world. What would your life even look like? What would fun feel like without food? Is going to the movies the same without the food? If not, then you're probably not going to the movies for the movie as much as you are for the food. Could you even go to the movies and not eat? If a movie theater was 2 blocks away from you could walk there and they didn't have any food. And then the same movie theater was 10 miles away, but they had food. Which one would you go to? Right? There's no right or wrong answers. It's okay wherever you're at. You just need to be really honest with yourself. Can you have fun without food? Can you experience good feeling without food? Can you experience enough positive feeling to where you would be happy with your own life? Can you experience enough positive feeling to where anyone else would want to live your life? Do other people want to live your life? Just from the pleasure scale. Everyone wants pleasure, right? We all get it in different ways. I'm working towards getting it in different ways. I get pleasure from helping other people. I get pleasure from positive feedback on this podcast. I get pleasure from positive interactions with friends and with women and with working out and with the sauna and all these other things. Bring me great pleasure. I get pleasure thinking about what it's going to be like to be a father And what an amazing mission that's going to be on. And I get pleasure from visualizing my future wife, like really tapping into what it is that I desire in partnership. And I get pleasure from improving myself and sitting with the discomfort of the parts of myself that I don't like and finding acceptance for who I am and how I got this way, and then addressing the root of the issues. And like these things bring me great pleasure. The betterment of my life and the life of the people around me bring me immense pleasure. So much more pleasure than food ever could, than ice cream ever could. And there's no crash associated. Think of how crazy, but I had none of that when I was fat. I had none of it. So all my pleasure was food. So the question becomes, how can you build a life that feels good without food? And then let food be the icing on the cake. I'm not saying stop eating all the food that makes you feel good. I'm saying if you couldn't eat anymore, could you live a life that felt good to you? And would anybody else want to live? Would it feel good enough that anyone else in the world would want to live that life? If the answer is no, consider you might have less of a food problem and more of a life problem. And your willingness to address the life problems, and really your willingness to sit down and write down the truth and how you actually feel about what I'm saying right now will dictate the sustainability of what you're doing and the likelihood of you actually achieving your goal and keeping it off. These are the conversations that you need to have with yourself, and surround yourself with other people that are talking about these things in this way. Because you will never count your calories to weight loss if you do not address the fact that food is one of your sole sources of joy, and that there's nothing else that you like to do. And that if it really came down to it, like if it really, really, really came down to it, and again, this is in the world where we all just breathe for air, right? If you didn't have to eat, if you had to choose between eating your favorite foods and having sex with your partner ever again, which one would you choose? Like if it really came down to it, which one would you choose? I'm not here to tell you that that's a problem, but it probably is, right? And I've been there, because sex also was rough for me when I was fat. I didn't really enjoy it. That all being said, if your life is not satisfying without food, you need to find a way to make your life more satisfying without food. If you don't know how that works, Nick, I don't have any hobbies. I don't know what I'm passionate about. I'm just like, live alone. I'm in this marriage that I shouldn't even be in, and it's been years, and now I'm 54 and like got this health thing and diabetes, my blood pressure. When I eat pizza, my fingers swell, but I still do it. And like whatever it is that you're going through, right? Sit down and visualize. If your life started today, like fucking today, your life just started, you wanted to build a life of anyone that you wanted. If you had to play yourself like a video game, what things would you want to do in the video game? And then just start doing them. Like, it doesn't matter if you're fat. Just start doing them. Well, I want to go play basketball, but I'm too fat. Go play basketball when you're fat. Go alone and shoot around. I want to go walk to the beach, but I'm too fat. Find it in you to walk to the beach even though you are fat. Go early before anyone's at the beach. Go late at night. If it's too, like, get to the point where you just become the person that does the things that you actually would want to do if you were fit. And when you start doing them and sitting with the discomfort, just do each thing 1 or 2 times. Nick, but people judge me? Yes, they do. And you judge yourself too. And fuck what other people think. I don't like the way other people look at me. You don't like looking at yourself in the mirror. Like, again, like, who am I to say that, right? I don't know if that's your specific story. I'm speaking to my old self. Nick in 2019, I used to think that I don't want to do these things because I don't like the way that other people look at me. But at the same time, I didn't like looking at myself. So how can I blame other people for judging me when I judged the fuck out of myself? How can I blame other people for not treating me with love when I didn't treat myself with love? Like, or present like somebody that even fucking gave a damn, right? The way to start giving a damn is to figure out what you want to be passionate about. I don't have any passions. What if you had to be passionate about something? What would it be? I don't have any hobbies. What if you had a hobby? What would the hobby be? And then just start doing it and give yourself permission to stop doing it and start doing something else. Because when you start attacking life like that, you're going to find that you do not have a food issue or much of a food issue. You've just got a life issue. You've got a coping issue. You've got a not grabbing life by the balls issue. And you take this mentality, right? This sternness, you can feel over the last 5 minutes or so, this sternness is coming out of me. This is the energy that I have treated myself with to get the results and keep it off and continue to progress in my life as a coach in relationship, as a friend, as a content creator, as a podcaster, right? You go listen to my first episode of this podcast versus now, it's totally different. Totally different vibe, totally different energy, way more in tune, way more flow, even though this episode's kind of all over the place. But it's like I kind of know what I'm doing now. I didn't know what I was doing before. Let yourself have your fucking journey. Let your journey be that you were fat and you were all alone and you were living this life where everyone around you, kind of loved you, but you didn't love yourself. You didn't love them. You couldn't accept the love. You always wonder what if, and then you just started doing things. And then you just started finding a little bit of pleasure on that hike. And I'm like, oh my God, I went on a hike for 5 minutes. I've never done that because my hips hurt when I walk up a staircase. But I just kind of worked up to it from doing 5-minute walks. It's been a week, and then I went on a 5-minute hike. That feels good. What if I start working towards, hiking a little bit more? Then you become passionate about hiking. Now you're like, shit, in a year I might want to go on do this real hike. It's like a 5-mile hike. Now you've got a goal that has nothing to do with your weight. And now whenever you're fucking eating, the idea of eating something that consistently that does not help you get to that goal feels bad in your body to think about. This doesn't get me to that hike. I really want to do that hike. Like eating all this pizza is not helping me get to that hike. Like when you get to that point in your life where you have so much other shit going on that you care so much about outside of food becomes easy. It just does. It did for me. It does for a bunch of my clients too. This is what the work is. When I say we address the whole person, the mind, body, the soul, the spirit, this is what the actual work is. No diet is ever going to teach you this stuff. And that's why no diet actually works unless you obsessively stay on the diet for the rest of your life. If you take away anything from this podcast episode, let it be to meet yourself with loving sternness, the way that I am on this episode. That tonality of sternness that you feel right now comes from a place of love. I treat myself in this tonality. I speak in this tonality because I love myself. Not because I'm trying to beat the fat out of me and I hate myself, but because I truly love myself and I don't let myself off the hook. I crack the whip on myself because I love myself. And I hold myself to a standard of doing things because I love who I am. And I desire to have impact on the world. And I desire to feel good in my body and out of my body. And I desire to have a lot of pleasure in my life. And I desire to feel good about the direction that I'm going and feel good about who I am. And I desire to mean that, not just to say it, to practice meaning it, to manifest what it would be like to feel good, to actually mean it. Like to really mean that to my fucking core. And the way that I did it was by building hobbies, building passions, building life direction, working on them. I started getting more pleasure from that than I ever could have from food ever. And my food addiction went away. Because my goals were so clear. Who I am became so clear to me. What I want became so clear to me. My hobbies became so much clear to me that I got to the point where I could live a life without food. Not physically, biologically. I eat plenty of food. I'm very well nourished, right? But hypothetically could live a life without food and still immensely enjoy myself. And it wasn't until I made that switch that I lost the weight and actually kept the weight off in a way that didn't require any discipline in the long run, because I changed who I was as a person and all my baseline habits changed. If you made it to the end of this podcast episode, you absolutely have what it takes to lose weight and keep it off forever. You're not going to do it. You're doing it right now. It's not, oh, yes, I will. It's I am right now. I choose to. Not I think that I will. I'm confident that I will. I choose to right now. May eat a healthy meal right now after listening to this podcast. If you don't have groceries, I choose to go to the grocery store before tomorrow. I am not starting my diet tomorrow. I am choosing to prioritize my health starting with the next thing that I put into my mouth. Feel the difference between those energies. No one that ever lost weight and kept it off started tomorrow. They all started today. Every single one of them started today, the moment they had the thought. You ultimately get to choose. And there's no right or wrong answers, but you do have what it takes. Nobody ever told me that. And I wish that somebody did, because it would have made my journey a lot easier. If you're feeling called to this kind of work, and if you're resonating with the energy that I'm speaking with and the things that I'm speaking about, if you feel the truth in what I'm saying, that means that you and I have a lot of similarities to our story. If you'd like for me to guide you through the journey of doing what I did for myself, looking back to what's now been 6 years later, click the link in the description of this podcast episode and fill out the short form, and I will be speaking to you here shortly. If I don't know who you are and it's your first time on the podcast, send me a DM. I love speaking to new listeners. See y'all next week.